Welcome to another episode of the Engaged Parish Podcast presented by eCatholic. On today's show, we're excited to welcome Tim Glemkowski, who has been at the forefront of some of the most exciting movements in the church today, most notably the National Eucharistic Congress. Yeah, you might have heard of that. That took place in Indianapolis last summer. Before I introduce Tim, I want to mention that the Engaged Parish Podcast is brought to you by eCatholic. If you like the content that we've been producing for this podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and please share this show with your colleagues and friends. It helps us tremendously. Also, if you have feedback or suggestions, you can reach out to our producer, Brandon, directly at producer@engagedparishpodcast.com. As I mentioned a moment ago, today's guest is Tim Glemkowski. In August of 2024, Tim was appointed Executive Director of Amazing Parish, a ministry founded by leadership expert Patrick Lincioni, focused on helping parishes build healthy leadership teams and create vibrant, mission-driven cultures. Before stepping into this role, Tim served as the Executive Director of the National Eucharistic Congress, playing a key role in launching and leading the U.S. Bishops' National Eucharistic Revival, a bold initiative to renew the church by reigniting devotion to the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Tim is also the founder of La Alto Catholic Institute and the author of Made for Mission, Renewing Your Parish Culture. He brings with him not only a passion for evangelization and parish renewal, but also a heart that is rooted in prayer, mission, and love for the church. In today's conversation, we'll dive into his experience leading the National Eucharistic Congress, his experience so far at Amazing Parish, and what it takes to renew parish culture for Christ in today's world. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time. We really appreciate we really appreciate you being here, and I'm really excited for our conversation today. So the first question I have is, what was it like leading the National Eucharistic Congress? This was the first time in, 70-something years that we've had this in the U.S.?
Yeah, it was, I mean, the honor of a lifetime in some ways is probably the only way I can think to describe it. Very much so, I think our whole team felt just called by God to be swept up into something, a plan he had for the church. And I'd been involved with the Eucharistic Revival early and been really convinced that God was doing something pretty unique there for the renewal of the church, calling people back to an encounter, a personal relationship with him in the Eucharist as part of the missionary conversion of the church. And I mean, it was an incredible 3 years getting to run the Congress organization. Way more work than I think me and my wife even ever expected and anticipated. But just the kind of thing that's why we all get into ministry, right? Is we want to see impact. We want to see people's lives changed, and to get to see that at such a dramatic scale and see God working so powerfully through the pilgrimage and the Congress, it's hard to describe in some ways.
Do you have a favorite memory or standout when you're actually there in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the opening night, right, stands out in my mind because it was a crazy hectic day. Registration hadn't gone well, sort of like practically, and people had been telling us for years it was going to be a Catholic fire fest. And I remember one of my team members came up to me about middle of the day when the registration line was around the block, and he was like, "Well, we did it." And I was like, "Yeah, we did it." And he's like, "No, I mean, we actually did run the Catholic fire fest." So we were, but it was like a last sort of purgative moment of the Lord just saying, "Hey, this is me." And when we got into the stadium that night, we chose to actually just open the doors to the stadium. Like anyone could have gotten in if they were in the city that night. They had to go through security, but you didn't need a ticket because we just couldn't get everyone through registration in time. And when, the pilgrimage routes, we had sort of the ceremony where they came in and they each presented an icon of the saint from their pilgrimage route around the altar. And then Bishop Cousins brought Jesus in the Eucharist in. I remember one of our donors, I was up in a suite with a lot of our biggest benefactors, and one of our most significant benefactors, kind of a very well-known leader in the American church, came up to me, and he's tears are just running down his cheeks. And he said, "I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this," and I think that's how we all felt for 5 days, was just whatever we expected. We kept saying, like, we think God's going to do something big here. This is not just like another gathering of the church. I just got a story yesterday of a college student sent to me of like a dramatic physical healing that took place at the Congress. Like, he was working so much more powerfully even than we expected. For me personally, the highlight was getting to walk with my daughter in the procession. We had 60,000 people in a Eucharistic procession in downtown Indianapolis, and she was a first communicant this year. And so she had decided, she'd brought her first communion dress because all the first communicants got to go in the front and throw flowers. And she had decided not to do that at the last minute. And then right before it was about to start, she was like, actually, I want to go. So she threw on her first communion dress, and I threw on a polo, and I got to hold her hand and just walk in the front of the procession. And that was pretty powerful. We got to go up on the memorial where the adoration then was held, the holy hour, and sort of just look at the people as they were coming in and wave at, and the joy, the palpable joy was kind of inexpressible. So yeah, I'd like, there in some ways, if you ask me, would I do it all over again? It's like, I don't know if I could, knowing everything that I know now, like what it would take. But there's also just a part of me that's like, I'd love to be able to relive some of those days. It was just so heavenly. It was such a heavenly experience of the church.
Hey listeners, the future of evangelization is here. Join us for the Engaged Virtual Summit presented by eCatholic, a watershed event in the Jubilee Year of Hope. Learn from top Catholic leaders, gain practical strategies, and discover tools to grow your ministry. Happening October 21st and 22nd. Get your pass now at summit.ecatholic.com. Now back to the show.
Yeah. And I know the impact this had. I wasn't able to be at the Congress last year, but Brandon, our producer, was. Joe Garcia from our team, a few other eCatholic folks were there. And Brandon was even recording things with folks that were there. And, you could see the joy that this had for all those in attendance. And also, I think the fact that some of this was live streamed on EWTN and other places, the rest of the church who couldn't be there physically felt part of it. And I know that was part of your mission there. Could you talk about how the digital component of the Eucharistic Congress kind of played in to make the whole church in the U.S. feel a part of this revival?
Yeah, so we made the decision early on to really prioritize our two key media partners, Relevant Radio and EWTN, and to basically just give them the live feed of everything that was happening. Like everything that our production team had, they just got. So it's sort of like whatever you want to do with it. And so they built a lot of programming around that and made it available to the church. And I think it was one of the most important decisions we made because, one, it actually led to we were getting registrations every morning for each day because people were hopping in their cars. They're like watching it on EWTN and like buying tickets online. Like, I got to go, I got to be there. So all these people are like flooding in because of that. And then, I think the ability for people around the United States to join in and pray with us. And the live streams were so powerfully done by both Relevant Radio and EWTN that I think it actually I've gone back and watched them since, and it really did give a sense of what was happening in the room. Like you could really, it was so expertly done by them that you could feel it. And then honestly, globally, there were the number of countries that were tuning into those live streams is actually pretty remarkable. And it's led to a lot of local National Eucharistic Congresses. So this is our first in 83 years. 1941 was the last one, St. Paul, Minnesota. This was the 10th National Eucharistic Congress. That was the 9th. A lot of countries have never done one. And now we've heard about Trinidad and Tobago, a couple countries in Africa, some countries in Europe, Southeast Asia are looking at founding National Eucharistic Congresses because we had the team from the next International Eucharistic Congress, which is going to be in Sydney, Australia in 2028. They were at our Congress to sort of like see it. And the difference of what we tried to do was we wanted the Congress to be an event that showed the church what evangelization looks like experientially, and actually help people encounter Jesus. Like not just a catechetical exercise or nice talks or isn't it so great that we're together, but actually to be like pushing into, we need to be healed as a church and unified and formed and encounter Jesus personally and sent. And so the global impact of that is I hear about a lot of this stuff like that's getting built now, and you're going to see over the next decade a lot of that come to fruition.
That's beautiful. And I think that's fruit in and of itself coming out of the Congress. And I think I've heard more than just rumblings of another Congress coming up soon. Are there any details on that here in the U.S.?
Yeah, they've officially announced that 2029 is going to be the 11th National Eucharistic Congress. So in some ways, the experience we hoped, we had thought about 2033 had always been, that'll be the next one. And then so much, momentum around, can we do one sooner? Can it be more on like the Olympics, 4 or 5 years kind of schedule, which is what they used to be. It used to be like every 4 or 5 years. Sometimes it was even 3 in between Congresses. And so I think that's more the cadence that we're going to fall into now. We're still going to do something really special for 2033 in the United States, but the getting to do one even sooner, just because of the response of the people of God. And I think, God willing, even more, all the lessons we've learned in terms of how you can structure this and make it really affordable and make it accessible to people and to families, but then also people actually having a tangible picture of what a Eucharistic Congress looks like. I think we'll even, God willing, make that significantly more well attended. We had about 55,000 tickets sold. I think the next one might even be bigger.
Wow. And I can't even imagine the logistical challenges. I mean, I think you mentioned you saw grace working throughout this process. I was listening to one of your a different interview that you did, and you mentioned the story of JP2 when he wanted to have Denver be the site of, I think it was World Youth Day. Could you tell that story? I think you were mentioning it just in terms of thinking about the logistical challenges of, can we pull this off? Because I thought that was interesting. I think it was a story that, a bishop or cardinal had relayed to you.
Yeah. So for people's awareness, right? Usually when the church does something big like this, there's a budget for it, right? There's money set aside, and there's teams and resources in place already to pull it off. You think of when the World Meeting of Families came to Philadelphia, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia really took the lead in, staffing and fundraising to really make it happen. Or you think of World Youth Day, there's an office at the Vatican. They work with a local host site. The local host site runs it. There's a bishop in charge of it. This was very different in the sense of that, we basically started from zero, so when I started in April 2022, we had no money. I was the only staff person. So we had to really start from scratch. And in some ways, I think what we were convicted about is what we were doing was refounding a movement of Eucharistic Congresses more than just sort of having a one-off event and then shutting everything down after. So we built all of that with that momentum in mind. But we only had, at the time of the Congress, 14 staff, 14 employees of the organization. Usually you'd have at least 50, and then all of your vendors and your contractors and all that stuff. So it was a scrappy effort that a lot of people worked really, really hard on, but the staff in particular sort of just took a leap of faith, uncertainty about whether this was going to happen. Is this even, I had conversations even 3 or 4 months before the Congress with very important people in the church where they were like, hey, do we pull the plug? Is this working? Kind of thing. And so this was sort of the tenor of it the entire time, was just incredible uncertainty about, we were building a vision for this Congress, but also for the future, for the pilgrimage, and just incredible obstacles the whole time. So I met this person who knew John Paul very well and worked with him, who was present at a dinner in Rome to celebrate with a lot of the leaders in the church in the United States that Denver had been selected as World Youth Day for the site of World Youth Day 1993. And Denver was not the place you would choose. Denver still, I live there today, is a very post-Christian city. It doesn't have a Catholic infrastructure in the way a lot of cities do. We have 4 or 5 high schools. I think there were 4 or 5 Catholic high schools in my 2-town area growing up outside of Chicago. You know what I mean? So the leaders in the church in the United States, John Paul loved Denver and felt very convicted that this was going to be a place that the new evangelization was going to really be birthed from. So he'd chosen it. And so he, this whole dinner, all of these people are trying to convince him to move the city. You've picked the wrong city. You can't have it here. And they're just lambasting him, the Holy Father, you know what I mean? They're just so much, they're critical. You got to pick, it's got to be Philly. It's got to be Chicago. It's got to be New York. It's got to be Boston. No one's going to come to this. And so what they're thinking is, we're going to be embarrassed, this is going to be a visible public failure. You've had these World Youth Days that all these people have come to, and you're going to do this one in the United States, the first one, and no one's going to come. And so he's listening sympathetically this whole dinner while they're talking, a couple of hours, right? He's yes. And all he would say is, yes, yes. Many difficulties. And he would kind of go back to eating. And he's John Paul. He's so warm, and many challenges. But after 2 hours of this, I think he loses his patience a little bit. So he stands up at the table and everyone goes quiet because now the Holy Father's standing, and he slams his hands, boom, on the table, next to his plate. And he looks at all the, really important people in the church that are, not agreeing with this is just his decision. He said, well, let's try. And he left dinner. So this guy told me the story because he was saying like, that was the kind of sort of pressure we were under, is like, this is going to be this big visible public failure. Why do we even need this? There was a lot of questions about the initial budget, which had been $20 million. We got it down to 14 for the actual Congress, like questions about all the ticket prices. And so against all of that sort of the backdrop of just a lot of difficulties and doubts, this guy was saying like, if the Lord wants this, it's going to happen. And that was very much so our experience of it.
Thank you for spearheading it. Because again, people don't realize those logistical challenges that arise, the doubts that arise, probably maybe even sometimes in your own mind a little bit.
Yeah.
But to push through and have this moment for the church, it was beautiful. And the Congress, you've always described it as the moment for the revival. The revival was or is a 3-year process. We're in the 3rd year now. How do you think the Eucharistic Revival is resonating with Catholics today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really felt like the pilgrimage to us was, the revival was kind of creating local fires. Like it has to take root in the parishes or it's not going to be, that's the reality for the church in general, and the church in the United States is unless renewal is happening in the parishes, we could have great things happening and great apostolates doing great work, but it's not going to be pervasive. It's not going to be like the cultural reality of the church unless it takes root in the parishes. So that was the revival. The pilgrimage was sort of gathering up all those fires in a movement of intercession, leading to devotion, leading to the Congress, which was this moment to send everyone on mission. I think for us, what we really were hoping we were going to put in front of people is, again, that Jesus in the Eucharist wants to be the center of our lives and the center of the church, the center of the church's life. The way we encounter Jesus in the Eucharist is through that personal relationship, through that encounter. It's not just an idea. This isn't just sort of a doctrine that we have to inhale, but it's a relationship that we're invited to. And when we live from that place as a church, we become fruitful. Like that's the sort of breathing in and out of the exitus and reditus of the church. Like the church's mission is not just about activity. It's not about just function, but it's about, or form, but it's about relationship that then overflows into mission. And so if there should be a legacy of the revival, that's kind of it. Like we're being called right now to a missionary conversion of the church. The last 60 years of the church across the world has been trying to be focused on that. We were trying to highlight the essential connection of the Eucharist to mission. And so certainly we hope that parishes are more Eucharistic. There's more adoration. There's more devotion at the Mass. There's more sort of beautiful liturgical expression, inviting people to that devotion. There's greater catechesis. Like all of these things are essential. But really what it has to flow to is a new missionary energy and conviction for the church that seeks the least and the lost, right? And so that hopefully, God willing, is and I think if maybe the Congress's part in that moment is maybe I think why it was so encouraging to so many people is like the Lord was truly with us. Like it was, I think sometimes we do as a church, like we're pretty discouraged. We've had a lot of scandal. We've had a lot of, sort of discouraging things happen in the church in the United States in the last 25 years. And I think what this was, the hopeful sign of this was that the Lord has not abandoned us, to like left us to our own devices to kind of figure this out. We've been fishing all night and he wants to show us where to throw our nets. And I hope I think people, the stories are incredibly powerful of the way people's lives are changed from it.
Have you heard from any parishes that embraced deeper Eucharistic devotion in their communities and what that's led to within those communities?
Yeah, it's looked a lot of different ways, a lot of different places. Certainly, greater opportunities for adoration. We heard a lot about a lot of renovation projects, even where parishes were bringing the tabernacle back to the center of their, sanctuary because there was a desire to highlight the presence of Jesus and in the parish's life. The goal of it all was really conversion, right? Like, again, not just notional assent, which is like, that's John Henry Newman made this distinction. John Henry Newman said there's two types of assent. Assent is saying yes to something, right? And that's essentially what faith is. God has revealed something to be true and we say yes to it. That's like the relationship of faith. Like that's what's different from faith and reason is we're just saying, I trust you. I believe that what you've revealed to be true is true. And so notional assent is like when we say that yes, and it's just kind of with our minds. It's like, yeah, like I understand the doctrine, I say yes to the doctrine. Real assent is something that changes my life. It's like a person to person reality that then says what I've said yes to actually then becomes my lens through which I see reality and shapes the way I live. And so to me, the most encouraging statistic that we're seeing right now, and God willing, the Eucharistic Revival was a small part of this. I think it's part of the revival of the church in the United States that the Lord is bringing about, is RCIA numbers in a lot of places are up dramatically. We talked to a lot of parishes that were like, yeah, we had 6 people, 6 catechumens 2 years ago. We had 22 last year. This year it's 44. These are like real stories I've heard. I was in the diocese giving a talk to men in the fall, and they were saying that their RCIA numbers last year were up 80%. So people are searching right now. People are hungry right now. And the church has to be ready to actually engage them, like to actually give them an answer to the question and longing of their heart. And so that to me would be if we want to look at a number that would define the success of the Eucharistic Revival, it would be whether that number continues. Do we continue to see more and more conversions to the faith? Not just, and part of that will be a greater percentage of Catholics actually being able to say, yes, I understand the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, but it is so much more than that.
Yeah, it does seem to me as well that there's just so much hope, growth going on in parishes right now, in the church right now, especially here in the United States. I can't quite put numbers to it, but you just get this sense of something's rumbling. And you're right, the church needs to be ready. And I do believe that the Congress and the revival were preparing the church to be ready for hopefully what we'll continue to see over the next few years. So thank you for sharing the insights from the Congress. I do want to move over to your new role at Amazing Parish. Last August, after the Congress wrapped up, you stepped in to be the executive director. What drew you to the mission of Amazing Parish?
Yeah, it's been a mission I've been aware of and sort of connected to for a long time. The organization I'd founded in 2016, L'Alto Catholic Institute, had been doing similar work work with pastors and their teams to focus on making disciples. We didn't have as much of an emphasis on organizational health, but I grew in my conviction over time. My role before the Eucharistic Congress was I was the director of strategy for the Archdiocese of Denver, and I facilitated our leadership team there, which was coached according to Pat Lencioni's principles of just like how to build a healthy culture as a ground for renewal. And so for me, the parish has kind of been a huge part of my heart and conviction for a long time. L'Alto had closed down during COVID. It was all on-site consulting and speaking. And so it was like basically overnight, all the work was gone. And so my wife and I made the hard decision to sort of close up shop. And we had some clear signs and words. There's some stories in there I could, if we had more time, I could get into, but that the Lord was kind of calling us to a new mission, which I think became the work of the Archdiocese of Denver and then the Eucharistic Congress. And so the opportunity when they were looking for an executive director for Amazing Parish to get back to some of that work of really helping priests and pastors and parishes, for me, it was kind of almost like coming home in some ways and doing that work. And so it's been great. I've been here since August 15th I started. And, just a beautiful mission that's actually really, this, right? And I don't want to sound negative, but like there's a lot of things in the church that are more fire than heat, if that makes sense. Like there's Absolutely. More, I don't know, there's more like activity and funding, behind them that allows them to perpetuate, but they're not really like moving the needle in the parishes. And that was why I took the job at Amazing Parish, is it became clear to me that like this actually works. This actually helps. We have a lot of stories of pastors who say to us, like, this didn't just help our parish, this saved my priesthood. And to me, that's critical. Like the number one issue in the church today, in my opinion, is as our resources shrink, like we're in a recessionary climate in the church. And as that happens, it's creating tremendous pressure-filled choke points for a lot of pastors. Numbers of parishes. We coach a pastor who has 12 parishes.
Wow.
12 rural parishes.
That's insane.
So it's like, and he's like a mini bishop, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's like a diocese back in the day. And so there's that, but then there's also, you have a big parish, but a big parish used to have maybe 4 priests. Now it has 2. It's just the, and that's just, there's some dioceses have even noted that like they expect as many as 50% of their priests to leave the priesthood within 10 years of ordination. Like it's sort of like an recognized crisis in the church. And instead, we as lay people just get frustrated at our priests all the time. They're not enough this, they're not enough that. We don't like we don't like this. And really, I think they have very few places that they can go to actually get help. Like, help me to do this. And so what we do, I think, is we certainly have an eye for the renewal of the parish, but we do it in a way that actually helps priests to live. That situation isn't going to change anytime soon. It has to. We have to address the structural realities of the church to see renewal. But for the next 20 years, that is going to continue to be the reality for many of our young priests and pastors. And they just don't want to do it the way we've always done it. They want to live it differently. They became priests because they want to be apostolic. They want to like make disciples and lead change. And we actually help them do that. So it gives them back their priesthood, almost like the priesthood. I think the reason for many of them, they say it saved their priesthood, is we give them the tools and the accompaniment to actually live the priesthood the way they dreamed about when they entered seminary. And that's very life-giving, I think, to a lot of them.
Yeah. I've noticed that with especially the younger generation of priests that you mentioned. You need to be convicted. You need to have a true calling to be a priest these days, because we all know the scandals that the church has faced. And it's amazing that you guys, well, it's in the name. It's amazing that you guys are supporting them. You touched on some of the elements, but what specific kind of work does the Amazing Parish do? You mentioned accompaniment with the priests. I'm sure there's other resources you provide, but if a parish were to want to work with Amazing Parish, what kind of support would they receive?
Yeah, we have events, right? We have a summit, like a conference. That's a great launching point for a lot of this work. A lot of it is about, for us, inviting people into that, pastors into that coaching relationship, because we have a process of, it's not really a process. We have a conviction that the way parishes are changed is through like mindset change and conversion in people's lives. Like, it's not about one program or one initiative, but it's really about how do you change the culture of a parish. And so we see that working through what we call the circles of influence, so it's the pastor, and each circle of influence has to focus, most kind of diligently on the next circle of influence out. Like, so many pastors say, I want to make disciples. And so they want to like go out into the world and make disciples. You don't have the bandwidth to do that. Like, so you have to create a healthy team. Like, you have made a decision to lead courageously, to take accountability for the results of the parish. You have to invite a team into that accountability with you to work around you, right? This is like in the business world, this is normal stuff. It translates to the church insofar as the church is an organization of people. Like, I think sometimes we get kind of people, if they're like, oh, like they hear words like organizational health and they're like, well, I don't want that, MBA stuff. And it's like, no, this is just like how humans interact, like right. A team of people will help you be, more sustained in your ministry. Then, even that team, often as we work with them, gets like, they immediately want to go do initiatives in the pews. They want to run new events, run new programs, all that stuff. And we have to say to them, no, like, you have to change first the culture of the next tranche of leadership in the parish, like your staff, your parish council, your finance council, your key volunteers. Like, they have to be bought into not just our vision or our clarity, but also our culture. Like, how we have a culture of unceasing prayer, of active discipleship, and of healthy teamwork. Like, this is how we live and think here. And you need to participate with us in that culture if we're going to see transformation. Otherwise, that layer can pull against the work we're trying to do in the pews. Like, they're working at odds with what we're doing. Then we can say, great, a lot of Catholics in the pews don't know Jesus. They have to know Jesus. We have to evangelize Catholics in the pews and then send them out on mission to the world. Your parishioners are going to be able to reach the people who are disaffiliated, unaffiliated from the church, by an order of magnitude more than just like the pastor, and so, how do you commission them to do that and to actually go on mission to make disciples? So that's really the core of everything we're trying to do is help parishes see transformation in that way through people in these increasing circles of influence. So we have a lot of content around that, right? Around that culture we're trying to create, a lot of resources, like a lot of our conference videos that are up online. And this is all stuff people can pull from and benefit from. But really, to do that work is a long, low, slow, hard work, and it's a hard journey. So everything for us is about really trying to invite pastors into that coaching relationship so that we can actually walk with them through it. Like, it's not going to really work the same way if we just give you the ideas and the playbook and have you go do it. that relationship is really where this happens. So I mean, we have pastors, incredible pastors that are leading huge parishes, small parishes, like every size, who have been in coaching now for 6-7 years, because they just, like, this has become part of the lifeblood of their priesthood.
Is there also a community aspect to Amazing Parish where, priests that you're working with and coaching can also learn from one another and lean on one another? Because I'm sure they all have very similar mindsets.
Yeah, we're working on more and more ways to do that. Like they're busy, and so sometimes
Sure.
like they're like another commitment but building out some cohort initiatives, more ways for there to be a community and a movement of learning and of growth. And certainly our events, that's a key part of it. Like we have a pastor retreat every fall or spring for our pastors in coaching, and that we've heard is probably one of the most impactful things we do, because we just take a group of priests sort of on retreat together. There is some like formation and diving more into them as a leader, but a lot of it is just actually building. So a lot of it's happening organically from things like the pastor retreat, from the Amazing Parish Summit, where over time they've grown. A lot of these pastors have grown to know each other very well, and so they do a lot of that organically as well too. So yeah, definitely that's how we see it. We call it a movement for that reason, because it's not just ideas, but it is community, and it is coaching, and it is all that. So
as you've been working with parishes, where do you typically see opportunities for improvement, gaps existing? Are there any common threads that you're noticing as you work with more and more parishes?
in parishes, like what are the things they could probably improve on?
Yes.
I see a few. Yeah. No, I mean, it's right. Like so it's all, we call them the smarts of the parish, right? How we communicate, how we, do our finances, how we, that stuff is all in a lot of businesses. If they weren't good at that stuff, they would have gone out of business a long time ago. Because of our funding model, that's not the case. Like, right. Like parishioners are going to keep donating. We might start to see, someone said recently, they were talking about another line of business that they're in, where they were saying that they see their industry as like, we're dying so slowly that we don't realize we are. And there's probably some truth to that for parishes too, right? Of like, so all that stuff needs to be optimized. I think the key for me is that healthy side though, of like a lot of where we're actually, the reason we're not addressing those effectively, or the reason even if we did address those things effectively, it still wouldn't be enough for transformation, is like the entire game has shifted, right? We live in an apostolic time. And so the culture, the way a parish thinks and operates, the mindset of the leaders, like itself has to change. And so that's where a lot of it comes in for me is how do we, set vision and clarity and then communicate that clarity? How do we hold people accountable to that clarity? Like, how do we lead? That's the stuff where in the church, I think we've been comfortable for too long with like letting the fruitfulness of some of our initiatives cover up for our like dysfunction in how we do it. And then we hear about these stories years later of, oh, actually this leader was like super dysfunctional, or actually like this college, it was a great Catholic college, but administratively it was like a total mess, and it's fine because it's going okay. Well, that stuff catches up to us, especially in like a recessionary climate in the church. If we're still growing as a church, sometimes those things don't catch up to us, but today they're going to. And so that's like, even for the Congress, that was we kept saying to our team, like, we have to be the first fruits of the National Eucharistic Congress. Like it was equally important to us how we did it as like what we did. And I think the same should be true for a lot of parishes, of like, we should be just as like, why don't parish staffs pray together? Like, why do you go in a parish office and we never actually talk about our relationship with God? Like, why aren't people saying to each other, like, hey, what's going on in your life? And like, what's God doing in your life? Why do we feel like, so some people say, well, I think parishes have to be more like businesses, right? Like they need to function better and be more effective for them to be like, they need to think more like business leaders. I think the opposite is true in some ways. They do, right? Like they're not very good at the business side of things. I think parishes operate too much like corporations sometimes, where it's like, we're just kind of doing jobs and we're sort of punching the clock, instead of saying, like, what did the early church look like? Like, how did the apostles and Jesus and the women who were with them, how did they think about their mission and ministry? And then how did that change the way that they lived? How had they encountered God, and how did they get folded into their work? And that to me is it's harder, and it's more slippery. It's like harder to wrap your head around, but that's the stuff where I see the most fruit in the church long-term is if we get really, the best time to start was 10 years ago. And the second best time is today, like we should have been doing that kind of work on the health of our parishes for a very long time. And we didn't, which is fine, but that's why they are where they are. And so now today is, that's where we really like those first few layers, those circles of influence that we're working on. A lot of it is just about creating a healthy culture, which is good soil that then fruit can come from.
Makes sense. 5 years ago, you released a book that you wrote called Made for Mission. And if anybody's interested in reading that book, they can find it on Amazon. What has changed positively or negatively over those 5 years? Because a lot has happened. We've had COVID, we've had the Eucharistic Revival and the Congress last year. What's changed since you wrote that? And what truly, in your view, makes a missionary parish today?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. It's funny. The book, I have like a funny relationship with the book because it was it's in some ways it was like it's amazing. Like I still get stories of like bishops will be like, hey, I got a copy for all of my priests. I think the core conviction of the book that's really, really good is that it's basically about the question of parishes exist to make disciples. That's what it means to be on mission. And how do we do that in a parish? Like how do we actually, I think for me though, my own experience at the Archdiocese of Denver, at the Eucharistic Congress, at Amazing Parish we wanted to write a book that was very, very practical, like not like a manual, but it was more like, instead of just making like that point had already been made that parishes need to make disciples. We wanted to say, okay, great. Like how do we create clarity around that? How do we cast vision? How do we create a clear path to discipleship in the parish, mobilize leaders, and then like shift our ministries to be more focused on the process of evangelization? And so I'm always like, there's always part of me that's like, if I wrote the book today, so much of it would be different. But then I go read it or I get these letters from bishops. I'm like, okay, good. There's still a lot of good in there. I think I would just, it'd be like, I'd add a lot to it and I'd clarify a lot to it. Like there's just been more experience in my own life and more that like you almost wish you could write it in a way that isn't static, but you could write like the second edition or something and fold in those new things. But yeah, that's what I would say is like the book is for people who are convicted of what it means for a parish to be on mission to make disciples and want a lot of good ideas and ways to think. The way I described it sometimes is like, I like to play golf. I'm like one of these like COVID golfers, that got like wicked into it with COVID. And golf is an art, right? Like not a science. Like if you're like, so you want enough principles and enough like, but there's a million variables. Like when you're at this part of the fairway, not this part, and you're, hitting at this kind of pin, not this kind of pin, and the wind is like this, not this, and the lie is like this, not this. Like so much of it changes that you're making a lot of decisions in a moment and then just picking one, and then you have more or less success with it. That's kind of what we were trying to do in the book, is almost like give someone like course management skills. Like we're not going to tell you like what exactly you have to do in the parish, but we're going to give you some guiding principles that are going to help you think your way through the golf course a little bit, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Once again, Made for Mission, and you can find that on Amazon. And as Tim said, still relevant today, 5 years later. Getting back to Amazing Parish, if a priest is listening right now, or someone at a parish who is a decision maker and they like what they hear and they want to learn more, obviously amazingparish.org is the place to go. But what do the next steps look like?
Yeah, I mean, just reach out to us there, schedule a call with our team to sort of talk about like what this looks like. And that's what I would say is like, if you're a pastor who wants to lead courageously, has gifts in that area, but could use help, like which we all can. I've always had coaches and mentors my entire career. And like, I think we think of sometimes like getting that kind of assistance as weakness. It's not at all. It's like really great leaders seek out this kind of support. So if you reach us to us on the website, we can just have like, we don't sell, you know what I mean? Like we like invite. If pastors want this, need this, they're a little bit dissatisfied. They know this could be better. They're a little bit blown away by the pastoral situation that they're put in. There's some complexities and difficulties that they didn't anticipate or don't feel like fully prepared for. But have a desire to actually, pick up the mat and walk a little bit. There's a lot of guidance here that's available. Honestly, a lot of like friendship. There's a lot of relationship that can be very, very helpful. Yeah, we're not an organization that's selling a product to you. We're not an organization that's going to try to just put you through sort of a 10-step process to make your parish better. Like what you're getting is some coaches that have worked with hundreds of parishes at this point, understand uniquely kind of the heart and scenario of a priest, and can walk with you through that with some coaching, but also some consulting of like, these things do work, and you need to see some of these things happening to find the traction you want.
For a pastor listening right now and just feels completely overwhelmed in the situation he's in, what words of encouragement would you offer him?
Yeah, just Jesus says, right, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And I think that there's a difference between like when Mary receives her calling and the invitation from God to be the mother of God, she asks questions, but doesn't doubt. You know what I mean? Zechariah, I think, has more doubt, and their experiences are very, very different, right? In terms of the good news, it's good news for you and for the world that you were called to be a priest, and God has not abandoned you. You're not beyond sort of the ability to, like, there's no such thing as, you know, what I've done or experienced or not done or not experienced or the situation I'm in that makes nothing will be impossible for God. And so, you know, I'd say don't give up. Don't give up on us. The church needs you. But you're also not made to do this alone, and you're not made to do this in a way that the desires of your heart, to be a saint, to lead well, to bear fruit, need to just go. Like, your calling doesn't have to be, it is a cross, right? It's a place of suffering. Every calling is, but God also desires your flourishing as his son. And so you don't have to do it in a way that's going to burn you out and leave you empty and leave you wondering why you got into this in the first place. The church is a hard place to work. Like the structure of the church is a very hard situation to operate in, and priests are at the absolute choke point of all of that difficulty. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. Transformation is possible in your parish and in your priesthood, and we've seen it. Like we've seen it happen.
I think there's a takeaway for us lay people as well to encourage and support our priests more. You mentioned it earlier. It's easy to criticize or find little things that we would want to change. But it's also important to remember the tremendous amount of stress and opinions coming in at all times to our priests. And so, of course, we should continue to pray for them and encourage them, and maybe even write them a little note just thanking them for their ministry.
Yeah. It's not Father, you should, Father, I could.
Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
that's us as lay people. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the best thing we can do.
One of the things you also mentioned earlier was how just starting to include prayer can produce fertile soil for some of this other growth and renewal to spring forth. We pray before our meetings at eCatholic, and I think it provides, I more than think, I know it provides tremendous grace in the conversations and the directions that we take here at eCatholic. But I also know, even in a parish setting, it could be a little bit awkward if that's not been the culture before. Is there a practical tip for a pastor listening that wants to start incorporating prayer and greater dependence on the Holy Spirit in their leadership teams? How can they do that practically and without feeling awkward? Maybe you just have to fight through the awkwardness.
Yeah. I think Father Josh Johnson, I interviewed for the Eucharistic Congress podcast last year, and he has done a lot of this work with like his parish. He's like a pastor, right? He's this very well-known priest, but he's also just a pastor, 9 to 5. And I think he gets a lot of life from that role. And he said the most impactful thing they did was they just started doing a staff holy hour, like to pray together. I think one of the reasons it's awkward for us to pray is sometimes we're not fully comfortable with our relationship with God in like the time we're spending with him and that vulnerability there and like opening our heart to that. But I think some of it is we don't know the people on our staff. So sometimes I think if we want to pray together, like if we want to actually have a, hey, can I pray with you right now type relationship? Yeah, some of it's just probably getting over the awkwardness and just being willing to do that. But some of it is actually about coming to real friendship. Like I think a culture of active discipleship is a culture where like I know the people I work with and I love them and I care about them. And I might not agree with them on everything or resonate with them on everything, but like, so a lot of the work even that we do with teams to help them be healthy, like we always begin the work of building a new team with an exercise that we call, like we're onboarding a new employee. So next Monday, we'll go back to this exercise and we do very simple exercise from Pat that's called the personal histories exercise. And it's just, everyone has to answer 3 questions. Where are you from? What order, like how many siblings do you have and what order are you in the family? And what's one challenge that you went through growing up that people might not realize about you? And it's amazing how I've done this with staffs. I just did it with a staff in Southern California in January. People have worked together for like 30 years. I did not know that about you. Like I didn't. And so that's, we're not going to pray, really closely with people that we don't know, that we don't like have a real relationship with. This is what I mean, where it's like, that's a business. That's a corporation. And I'm not saying like do things that are, sort of cross professional boundaries, or we can be professional, but we can also be relational in our parishes. Like this is what Jesus and the disciples looked like. They shared life together. And so I think we have to do the same. Like I think all these things, a culture of healthy teamwork, of unceasing prayer, and of active discipleship, all of them go together. I think another key piece, because you mentioned the kind of the role of the Holy Spirit in all of our work in renewal, is like we have to act like God is actually alive and real and moves and does things. Like we operate like orphans very, very often as a church, where we're like, I got to figure this out. I got to do this. It's godless self-reliance is what I think Dr. Bob Schutz calls it. And so beginning to pray like for decisions, like to take time, like come to a big decision as a leadership team and then go to the chapel for 30 minutes and pray about it. And then come back and just tell people not what you think, but what you heard from God. What did God say about what we're supposed to do? And it's been amazing. Sometimes like we would do this, the Archdiocese of Denver, Archbishop Aquila, like we really created a very beautiful leadership team. Like we had deep relationships with each other, like became friends, prayed well together. And it was so life-giving for me as a member of the leadership team. But like there'd be times where I'd come back from the chapel and I'd be like, I don't actually know, like, but this is what I heard God say, or this is the verse that he directed me to. And it'd be amazing. Or someone else would say that, where all of a sudden that like unlocks, well, I got something similar. What does that mean? And then it would like create this sort of, so like we have to act like God is real and he's active and he speaks to us and he wants to speak to us about the work we do and the decisions we make. And with that belief, then have practices built into our routines of working that allow him that space to actually do that. So, I mean, even the Congress, keep going back to it, like the whole reason that thing worked is because of all the intercession that we had around it. We had a monthly intercession gathering of hundreds of people. We had a small intercession team. We would give them things to pray about, to give us clarity and discernment about. The entire Congress, they were praying and fasting. There were 25 exorcists saying mass and blessing spaces the entire time. Like, if you want to know why the Eucharistic Congress worked, it's because it was soaked in prayer. These are not things that are like just for the Congress to do, or just for like, every parish should be operating that way, and we will begin to see fruit. We have to believe that. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Like, why did we come do this in the first place if we don't actually believe that we've been invited into this by God and that he's going to lead everything that we're trying to do if we give him space to do so? Like he's, so.
It's such basic but important principles that you had just mentioned. And we had a priest on a few episodes ago, Father Nick De Simone, who went through a parish merger, and he had stressed before any of the meetings around that the merging situation and discussion, he would start with a holy hour in front of the Eucharist and adoration. And now he goes around and he talks about that merge situation, because it just ended up so well, all things considered. And he tells these priests, start your meetings with a holy hour. And they're like, okay, yes. And then what? And he goes back and he says, don't skip that. It's important. And he attributes, and obviously it's true, so much of the success of that parish merger to starting all those meetings in front of the Eucharist. It's so important, but so easy to skip over. So thank you for just doubling down on that. It shouldn't be optional for our parishes and organizations. It should be the first step in everything we do. Yeah. Go to the Lord in prayer. As we bring this episode to a conclusion, I just want to know, what gives you the most hope right now as you look at the church in the United States?
Yeah, I'd say in some ways, what gives me the most hope is we're 30 years now after World Youth Day in 1993, which some consider kind of a bellwether moment for the new evangelization in the United States. I think that's probably right. I don't think it was like the beginning of it, but it was an important moment in it. I think if you look, I've had conversations with a lot of people who were part of sort of the early days of the new evangelization, and the things that they were doing and running into and bumping up against, or where different things were. I think if you look across the church in the United States right now, the battles that they were fighting are like we actually have an embarrassment of riches comparatively. Even we're not perfect by any means. I mean, there's a lot of brokenness and a lot of division in the church in the United States. There's a lot of good here. Like campus ministry on college campuses in the United States is at a place like the amount of Newman centers and the apostolates that are doing that work. Unbelievable. The resurgence in Catholic education, Catholic classical education, unbelievable. The priests, the heroic priests that are, leading parishes across the United States, incredible. The families, the resources, the things available to the church to do our mission more effectively in all of these areas. Like we are primed in some ways. Will that ever be borne out in numbers where like the decline of, sort of church attendance is completely meted? Yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure. But either way, I think we have to recognize that there's an incredible amount of fruitfulness in the church in the United States right now. And in some ways, we are really primed to meet what seems to be a broader sort of global wrestling with whether it was like entirely good to throw off Christianity as like the font of our sort of life as countries, as cultures in general. I think there is a broader hunger even in the secular world now to ask spiritual questions, and certainly plenty of to the opposite. And so that in some ways should enliven us and encourage us, but it should also sharpen us to say the areas in which we're not there yet, we have to get there. Like we have to be able to actually be credible witnesses to the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. And we have to look like a church that follows a God that rose from the dead 2,000 years ago and has already won the victory. But if you look around, I think right now, you're actually like, there's conversations that 10 years ago were unthinkable. I used to go give talks 10 years ago that were like, hey, like we should evangelize, we should make disciples. And people would be like, I don't think so. You know what I mean? 10 years later, you can't find a single bishop or a single pastor or a single priest that disagrees with that premise. Then it's, how, right? Like, and that's a great place to sort of wrestle and argue and find more clarity. But the things that are normative now in the culture in the church of the United States around being a church that is focused on mission and evangelization but you need to have been in this a little bit to see that. I was just having a conversation with this the other day. Like, I think people sometimes come into ministry and they've, been doing it for a few years and they're almost like, I see all the problems. And I'm like, yes, I also see them, like there are a lot of them, and some of them are worse than ever before. Maybe there's a lot of good that we might not be taking the time to recognize how good God has been to us in the church of the United States the last 30 years. So.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this, but parishes just have an abundance of resources these days. Obviously, the work you guys do at the Amazing Parish, shameless plug, but the work we do at eCatholic, building communication technology specifically with parishes in mind to help them fulfill their missions. All the different conferences, the conference you guys put on, the Campus Ministries Focus. I mean, we are abundantly blessed, and we shouldn't overlook that aspect as well. So thank you. And also I want to say here at eCatholic, we're huge fans of Patrick Lencioni. All of our new employees read his book, The Ideal Team Player. So really big fans of his, and definitely encourage parishes to check him out as well, on the leadership angle side of things. So as we wrap up, amazingparish.org, I want to bring that up again for those interested in that. Thank you again for your leadership with the Congress. Anywhere else that you would point folks to learn more about you and the work that you and Amazing Parish are doing?
Yeah, I have a personal website, timglemkowski.com, where I house a lot of my personal projects. Bishop Cousins and I wrote a book for the Eucharistic Revival on Eucharistic missionaries. that's available on Amazon as well too. It's called For the Life of the World, an invitation to Eucharistic mission. So it's trying to make that connection practically for an individual between like how does the Eucharist help us become Eucharistic missionaries, Jesus in the Eucharist. So I'd check that out too. And I just maybe ask for people's prayers. Continue please praying for me and my family, as all of us who are trying to just help the church continue to push the edge of like what's possible. None of this matters if it's not about Jesus came and died and rose so that every person in every time and every place might have an opportunity to encounter the life and life to the full that they're made for, right? And John Paul II's feast days today, and it's Jesus that everybody seeks when they dream of happiness, when nothing in the world can satisfy them. And unless we as a church, like that's everything that we do is because every person we've ever met will live forever. and is called, like, there is one answer to the question longing of their heart, and it is that Jesus. And being a church who is capable of and passionate about inviting people to meet that Jesus is still, there's a lot of work to be done in that regard. But there's a lot of hope too.
I think that's a good note to end on. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. God bless you. God bless Amazing Parish. And thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. God bless.